Please be aware, this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. Welcome back to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast, where we're ticking all the boxes and providing a minority opinion in popular internet discourse. I'm Tilly, my pronouns are she, her, and I lead the film discussions.
I'm Josh, pronouns are he and him. I lead the music discussions. And yeah, we've been gone for a bit. Tilly was finishing up uni. Uh, I was living that post uni, post
Yeah,
grad life. That horrifying purgatory.
you were living a bohemian lifestyle. Just, what's the word? Rampsing? There's a really nice word. Anyway, stomping. There we go. Around your old stomping ground.
There you go. Traipsing. You're
Yeah.
looking for a traipsing. Oh, I
Trape.
like. There you
Oh,
go.
you
I'll
really
let
made me
you.
feel like a piece of shit there.
I was waiting. I was like, she can do it.
She did not do it. She did not do it. She's boso brand. Yeah, no, but I'm really excited to be back doing this. I have basically spent like the last 9 months uh working my ass off, and like
Yeah.
genuinely I'm really grateful for the I'm really like not grateful isn't the right word, but I think the break has been really good for me, because without being like too, you know being like, wow, I'm really smart now, I do just think I know, like when I think about things, I am way clearer on why I like stuff. Like I don't think I was doing like a bad job before or anything, but I just think like when I think about things, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, my brain's working, and I think university did help. Finishing university helped that, but also like finishing university has made me much better because much less of my brain is being used up all the time, which is really nice. It's nice. It's a nice benefit of finishing that I didn't think I would have. Um,
It's
yeah.
interesting thinking the different relationships we have with podcasting as an activity.
Mm,
Because like for me, I don't know how much this parallels with what you're saying, but I very much view it as like needing to get things out of my system. Like during the break, I'd find
yeah.
myself basically just talking to myself, walking around. Like I have opinions. If I don't say out loud my thoughts, I can't. It's very strange. And then I'm like, oh, I feel good, even though no one heard that. I'm like,
Yeah.
yep, said it. And I guess kind of Letterboxd is a place for things like that too, like kind of
Yeah.
cataloging sites. To just kind of
Yeah.
say the thing out loud, so you can kind of stop thinking about it.
I'm
Yeah,
very aware of why you do this. And I think where we overlap is kind of like a need to do this. Just a need comes from different places. For me, it's like I want to be better. Like I want to like challenge myself to be as coherent as possible and like be able to articulate why I like stuff, because I think it is like a skill. I think it's something you're very naturally good at, and I think it's something that I need to like practice.
yeah.
Um,
It is like a different mode of viewing entertainment that is quite fun to me.
yeah,
I
yeah,
almost associate kind of with entertainment no thoughts with basically depression. Like if I put something on and I'm
yeah.
just not, I'm like
I
I
agree.
refuse to have any critical thoughts about this. I'm probably feeling profoundly sad that day, and it
Yeah.
feels good when I watch something and I have like it has a visceral reaction and I want to talk
Uh
about it
huh.
with other people. Like, even if I don't like the thing, that feels really good.
No, 100%. This is real cringe, but it like makes me feel alive. Like it makes me feel like I'm a person that exists in a wider world and I'm engaging with stuff. Uh, and yeah, like you said, like it's a different mindset, and I think that's why university made it so difficult, because I was thinking
Mm.
about no, I don't think, and I was thinking about art in a way of like how can I the mindset of using art for like your academic work really
Yeah,
like affected how I was engaging with stuff. And
interesting.
what's left over from that is like a more thorough interrogation of it. But there's like a way, but then the pressure is eased off because I'm just doing it for like enjoyment, and so I think I get more of like like literally just an entertainment thing out of like thinking about stuff this way now, which I've really been enjoying. Like I've really been enjoying watching The Boys and stuff like that. Like, you know, there's a lot of
Oh
stuff
boy.
going on in that show, and I love thinking
Oh, dude,
about it
we
and
got to do
talking
a
about it.
boys preamble when you finish that show.
Oh yeah, I
That'd
mean,
be fun.
screw it. Should we just do an episode on season 3?
We could, we could.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think you doing a dig. So for like audience listeners,
Oh
viewers who
yeah.
don't know, Tilly was studying film
Yeah.
version of
Yeah.
film
So that's
studies.
why I'm talking about entertainment so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas like I did philosophy, so it wasn't it for me. Like I never felt like art or entertainment got completely rooted into school life. So like it still felt
Yeah.
cathartic and fun to do it. And I think studying philosophy like has altered the way I kind of frame talking about art at certain points.
Yeah. One
But
hundred
it
percent.
never got to feel like a chore or like work. And I can see how like watching a film and every time you watch a film you're like, could I incorporate this into my disc? I could see that being like a very stressful mode to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not in like green. You're not like, let's just chill and watch this. But I know you've seen to just as segue abruptly into this, you saw Thor for like Thor Love and Thunder for like the second time last night,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why?
So okay, so I've been
For
going
context,
through.
we like most Marvel movies. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
I would say most of them. Maybe
Okay.
half.
Okay. I think internet like discourse on Marvel is completely poisoned to a point where it's
Oh, it's
impossible to
ruined.
engage with.
No.
Every side of the argument is so overly serious and self-important. It's ridiculous. Kind of
Yeah.
like both the Marvel is not true cinema and also the I cried when Soldier Man held the hammer. Like both of those sides of the argument are just really cringe.
It is a real horseshoe moment.
I gotta get the word cringe out of my like daily vocab because I don't like saying it. But
it's so applicable to this very specific context, though. It's so applicable.
But that being said, they're putting that on the side. I've been really into comic books lately. And just like every now and then you kind of hit like what some would call a phase. I would call it a stride of kind of just being able to consume unholy amounts of the same thing for like a period of time, and then just banking those knowledge, opinions, and experiences for future. I think I did this with anime when I was a teenager. Just watched so much shit in the space of 2 years, and it's good. It's nice when people make Evangelion jokes. I'm like, yep,
Oh, Gizmo loves it when people make Evangelion jokes.
He loves it. It's nice to be like, yeah, I remember when Shinji got into the robot. I was there when that happened, And now I'm going through that with comic books, I had a really nice experience where I went into a comic book store recently to buy some stuff, and I was chatting with the people who work there. I think I made a joke about early Moon Knight runs where he was introduced in the Werewolf at Night series, and like a D-list character being introduced into like an E-list character's comic is just very funny to me. It felt good. It feels like you're part of a community. It feels like you're building up pointless knowledge for dumb things, and together we will pretend that this matters. Just like when we talk about movies and video games. So I was super excited for the Thor film. Because I read the comic it's based on, God of Thunder by Jason Aaron. Kind of the beginning, the first two arcs of his run that began in 2011 and went through for a few years until he finished off with like the Mighty Thor stuff like in 2016ish. And that's like a fantastic comic. The omnibus with God of Thunder, which contains the God Butcher arc, the God Bomb arc. It's just like brilliant. I really highly recommended it. So I was like, oh shit, like this is a great book. Christian Bale's playing this villain. It's going to be a good time. And then like as the film was gradually approaching, I was remembering like, oh yeah, this is also a Taika Waititi film, and an MCU
It's really
film.
really weird. Like I when I saw all the trailers, I was like, man, it's really weird that he's directing this. Like, the more I was like, this is odd.
Yep, and like and I think like help me approach kind of MCU films as adaptation, rather than as like sort of the kind of
Translation.
yeah, and also as a systematic kind of factory line producing
Yeah,
blockbusters. I
yeah,
became more interested in okay, but how is this working as like an adaptation? Like, what relationship does this actually have with the comics? You know, the
yeah.
actual like people who write the stuff that like stuff is based on. And you know, there's a very strange divide where like if you're a comic book writer, you know, you're basically the same as like a successful indie game developer. You're okay, you know, you can pay
Yeah,
rent, you know, and you have a job. It's fine. You're doing the thing you like doing. But you know,
yeah.
if you're directing a film based on that dude writing that stuff, you're pretty damn well off. As are everyone involved in the
Mhm.
production. They're just two different worlds, right? And
Mhm.
and I think it really like brought into sharp focus to me kind of why MCU films have this weird sort of diluted quality to them. Because
Mm.
creatively, when you go into a film like Love and Thunder, there are like three things happening. There's the attempt to adapt Jason Aaron's comic, which is itself kind of a critical reevaluation of the Thor project and kind of questioning what Thor means as a character and, you know, why do we need him to be a hero? And then you have a Taika Waititi film and his own oeuvre and the things he thinks about a lot. Um,
Yeah.
Most obvious kind of through line coming through in Thor is kind of this, I guess, dude feelings and like
Self-esteem.
yeah, self
Self-esteem is a
esteem.
huge, huge thing in Ragnarok. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it kind
uh,
of looked like they were continuing that with this film, but I haven't seen it. I'm just letting Josh do his thing.
and yeah, no, self esteem is a big part of this film. Thor's sense of self, his feeling of a place in the world, wanting to find love and all that. I don't know,
Mhm.
and then you have like the concerns of the MCU, which is like they want kind of the tentpole, these little tentpole films to continue to like build out a universe and kind of like I don't know, make you want to see the next film.
Well, yeah, you want to. It's a continuing the iconography as like, oh,
Yeah.
a Thor movie. That's a big deal. Like, it's not just this personal thing. It's like an event.
Yeah. So when you go and watch when I go and watch the film, basically
Mm.
what you get is a Taika Waititi rom com mixed with vague like MCU cosmic kind of actiony stuff.
Yeah,
And then also like the characters by name only from the comic without any real interest in kind of
yeah,
what that comic is dealing with. So like it very much does feel like fake thing made for 8-year-olds based on a thing I really like. Um
yeah,
and there is like implicitly kind of there can be fun to be had there.
hmm
Um but when you leave it and you think like why did you pick this run to adapt? You know, what's the point of bringing Gore the God
yeah.
Butcher into this if you're not really going to take him seriously or try?
One thing I've heard people saying is that this is the movie that has really reminded them that Marvel movies are for kids.
Yeah.
Like I obviously I don't think they mean that in the sense of like, oh, there's a lot of cringe stuff in that one, but just
Mm.
like returning us back to that time where it was, and I don't think any Marvel films are doing like anything particularly complex. Um, but I think there's stuff going on in Thor Ragnarok, and there's lots of stuff going on in Guardians too. And I think this scene, yeah, I don't know. What does it feel like a kind of throwback to like the really like more emotionally simple time of Marvel?
Well, it kind of so I when I think of early MCU films,
Mm.
there's a sense of self seriousness about them. They are kind
Yeah,
of trying to make kind of these great summer action films, and there will be jokes and wisecracks, but there's always going to be a point where like a character's really struggling and like something really horrible happens. You know, even in the ones that people don't like Iron Man 2, you know, you do get the
yeah.
point where like Tony Stark is drunk and screaming at his party, and it's like
Uh,
I was a kid when I saw that, and I was like, this isn't a good time. You know, this is like watching
this
my
is
uncle get drunk
difficult.
and scream at a party. This isn't what I wanted to do as a child in the cinema. Um, This is sort of like none of the kind of weight or drama or kind of
Yeah.
feeling like things matter as you get in like a Russo brothers Marvel film, but
Mm,
all of the comedy. And I think that is the feeling that it feels like a kids film. And I honestly,
yeah.
I think it's fine that these can be kids films. I think that's okay.
Yeah, that's
I think like
fine.
Spider-Verse is fuck yeah, man. If I get to show if I ever have kids, I'd love to sit down and watch Spider-Verse with them. That's a
Yeah,
great family
yeah.
film, you
Spider-Verse
know.
is a 5-star kids film, and that doesn't mean it's any less than a 5-star adults film.
I think to about rambling on and on, I think fundamentally what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say is that my main disappointment with the MCU isn't kind of a vague angst about blockbuster films. I think on the internet you can get very like starry eyed. It feels like reading 13-year-olds who just discovered Godfather and they're like very angry that not all films are art films. They don't understand that.
They think
um,
that every Hollywood film from the 80s was like an art noir masterpiece, like a post noir
yeah,
masterpiece.
it's pretty exhausting. Blockbusters suck. Capitalism, contrived art. You know, these are okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just judging these as like adaptations and following kind of multiple Marvel stuff, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Watching them just kind of fumble with source material and just really have no interest in doing anything interesting with the material. To the point where you're like, who is this even for? Like this isn't for people who like the comics because they're not, this isn't interested in the comics in a really serious way. And what's left is like, yeah, kids and I guess like hive mind MCU types, and also
Yeah.
in a weird antagonistic way, they're sort of for the Scorsese kids who want to be angry at something, easy to be
Yeah.
angry at. Like it just, I don't know. Um, I don't know.
It's horrible. It's
It does feel like it's
horrible.
over. I had a real thing of like I really like Thor's arc in Infinity War. That was a good Thor, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like I think it's just done. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna bring it back. I mean I enjoyed Spider Man, but I don't
Well,
know. I don't know what's gonna bring it back. She Hulk will bring it
yeah.
back. Maybe I'm joking, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's kind of done, but we'll see. You know, people have been wrong before.
Yeah.
We could do
If
a
you
whole
like MCU
episode.
films, I implore you to read comic books. They are good.
Yeah,
There we go.
yeah.
That's my
We
final
could do
line.
a whole episode on like the ideologies of like pro and anti Marvel people, because I think we're just like pro. I mean, I think this is like a really normal thing to say. We're just pro film people. Like we just like films that are good, and sometimes Hollywood makes good films, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes there's Marvel films, and sometimes they are not. And I think that's about. I think that's ultimately all that people. The only opinion people need to have about this entire thing, and yet, nope, that's not. The world can't be that simple. Um, but move us, and if you're all done,
I'm all done. I'm all done. I'm all done. I'm all done.
you needed to get that off your chest.
It-
That felt like Rico Nasty anger management. That was fantastic. Okay, well, to move on to another adaptive work. That was good. I was happy with
yeah,
that one.
yeah. Stephen
We're
King,
back,
baby, we're
baby.
back.
We're back, baby. Yeah, we're talking about Brian De Palma's Carrie. Carrie. I mean, it's a classic. It's a classic.
Yeah.
You probably know the gist of what Carrie's about, but it's you know raised by incredibly oppressive Christian mother. Girl gets a dance. Girl gets a
Question,
dance. Girl
question
gets a
mark, question
chance.
mark, question mark.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Asterisk. Yeah. Um. Gets a chance to go to the prom with the hottest guy in school, and it doesn't go right. So I think I think this is a film that I'm really happy to come back to. Come back to the podcast with. I'm just gonna get my notes up because my other monitor was turned off. This is a film that me and Josh both unabashedly love. I know some people have their problems with this film and kind of Brian De Palma as a director, but honestly, I don't even really want to talk about those right now because it's just not. But if we get onto a
What are the what are the grievances of as somebody like isn't plugged into the department discourse?
Yeah.
Like, what is the grievances of him? Is it like
So
feminism
I,
kind of
I
stuff?
it's like feminist critiques, which we'll talk about this. We're not going to not talk about this film's representation of women because that would be that would be insane. Um, but we're not going to talk about these specific critiques. But they're kind of generally like number one, the cinematography. Like I think that would be the principal critique of like the exploitative opening shots and things like that.
Yeah,
Um, and then, but then broadly, it's like a questioning treatment of women in his films and like how they're used narratively. I think mainly, and also there's also some critiques by like fellow trans people of Dress to Kill. I think it is. Which is like a trans serial killer thing. But
yeah.
I've
Every
also seen
director's got to
some
have
kind
a
of
one film like that. They got to have at least one film where you're like, is this transphobic? You know?
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I've heard some like subversive like takes about how that film is actually really interesting, which because I haven't seen it, and I really want to check it out for myself because I'm really into like films that really seem like they should be like bigoted, like towards me mainly, where like it's a 70s like slasher film about a trans woman. And then like actually they say really interesting and like perhaps actually good political things. Like I love that kind of thing. So that makes me really want to watch it. Um, but personally, in terms of constructions of gender and women, I think I have essentially no issues with Carrie. I think what
Yeah.
makes this film so neat is that it's very like angry in a way that I think is incredibly good and productive and feminist. Throughout, there's this kind of disembodied rage at the face of the evil of what Judith Butler calls gendered life, and I kind of think of it as gendered existence. It turns what could actually be quite a dull second wave feminist text into something much more postmodern, something much more like post trans, or well, like post trans outpour for me. Something much more quintessentially in the ideas of Judith Butler and the idea of how we reconstruct gender within our society, which we're talking a lot about as well. I remember you mentioned, Josh, while we were watching this, that the like intent focus on womanhood was kind of inherited by Ari Aster, and I like completely and I completely agree, and I think what resonated with me about what you said was how both Ari Aster and both Brian De Palma, both men, their kind of identities really melt away into the text. They're very like clear works of the directors. Like Carrie is a very clearly a Brian De Palma film, and like
Yeah.
Hereditary and Midsummer are so Ari Aster,
Yeah.
like cinematography wise. But it doesn't. Their identities as men isn't something I'm really thinking about. It doesn't really feel like films by men about women.
Yeah. To me, I think part of that is, and like to kind of wrap this back up with your earlier comment about the criticism that's lobbied at the opening shots of this film in the changing room. I could 100% see that being viewed as like sexualizing teenagers and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes I can get a bit weary about the overly moralistic approach to art, and I think what's lost in
Hmm.
that kind of criticism is how thoughtful that shot is and how it
Yeah.
is depicting. Basically, like when I watch that, but the first thing that comes to mind is like classical paintings of like the Maenads, of these like beautiful kind of followers of Dionysus, the females, the female cult.
Hmm.
If you're a fan of the main what's the main book that deals with the Maenads? Yeah, Maenad lore. I don't know what to tell you. Bacchus. Great
Yeah.
play. And it reminds me of
Yeah.
that. And it's kind of like I feel like it's doing a thing of like it's sort of the imaginary of the platonic ideal of the woman, as kind of
Yeah.
easy and fun and beautiful and this youthful kind of when you think of the young girl, it's this kind
Yeah,
of fetishized form, and then
yeah,
the sharp rupturing of that with like the reality of Carrie bleeding and freaking out and screaming, and kind of how ugly that
yeah,
scene suddenly becomes. It feels
yeah.
very uh, purposeful. So even if it is a bit horny, and maybe De Palma should be criticized for that, for sure, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. I
yeah.
wouldn't want to lose how purposeful and thoughtful so much of this film is, in comparison
Yeah.
to say like way Ridley Scott shoots Ridley at the end of Alien One, which just kind of feels like I don't really see the point of her being
Yeah.
dressed like that
Yeah.
in that climactic scene. It just kind of feels like it feels more male gazy in a less considered way.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is explicitly kind of saying something about how
100%.
culturally reproduced images of women back to Renaissance paintings of the Maynards. Like it
Mm-hmm.
does feel like it's always trying to say something, even when it's a bit horny.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. I that kind of I think there's two ways I want to talk about that shot in particular. I think first is I think talking about it is really difficult because you get into conversations about kind of like essentially art not existing in a vacuum. So essentially, like, yeah, when you're watching this shot, you're watching this, like, very, like you say, deliberate artistic expression. Like, I know exactly why he's doing it, and I agree with you. Like, I'm glad it's in the film, but I guess there's the, like, more kind of material thing of the power like constructions of like a film set, you know, and like how such a shot was actually done, and kind of the mechanic, like not the mechanics, the reality of like this being, you know, a film made in the 70s, probably like an incredibly like male dominated crew with Brian De Palma leading. And so I think, yeah, like you said, it is very worth like interrogating and like talking about it. And I don't think people who talk about that component of it are doing something like bad. But I also do see your point of like, there is also on one hand this incredibly like important artistic statement being made, one that not only is being made in the beginning but is like integral to how the film treats the construction of womanhood like from the beginning. And I think like you kind of alluded to with the disruption of it, of how, you know, you have this incredibly tranquil scene that's kind of like shattered essentially by like Carrie's reaction to first getting her period. I mean, it's such a like perfect opening for how it depicts the. I think this film is very intent on showing the inherent trauma of the existence of like how we construct womanhood in the world in contrast to the physical realities that some women live. You know, so like we have this like natural like part of life that like some that like a lot of women go through that is like turned into, you know, what could be a communal moment of like understanding and compassion is turned into like this painful awful experience by like the very people who go through that experience themselves. And I think that detail, like the importance of it being these same girls that we see at the beginning, like, you know, in this shot of like that's like incredibly tranquil, is so important. It really like forces the viewer to be to like question how we see kind of very placid views of womanhood, and forces you to confront like essentially what being a woman uh in
Yeah,
a world that constructs like notions of womanhood does to people. So yeah, I think just that first like scene is just so important to
yeah.
everything.
It's a thorny and difficult kind of bringing up the tension between the material reality of making a film and the actual kind of
Yeah.
film itself we're talking about is like it is a difficult and thorny tension because I feel the same way about uh I'm heavily critical of how David Lynch treats actresses in Blue Velvet.
Yeah,
Who have openly come out and said that it wasn't a pleasant filming experience and it was like
yeah,
horrible. Doing those
yeah,
David Lynchy horror shots.
yeah.
So yeah, it's always a tension, I'm just saying I don't think that should dilute the overall discussion in terms of
No, 100%.
overwhelmingly. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember as well, Josh. You said that there was like an entirely different political reading of the film that you wanted to bring up.
Oh yeah. If you're Stephen King is another I talked earlier on about being at stages in your life where you can just take the fire hose of one specific thing, and Stephen King was one of those fire hoses for me. Um, we do it for King,
I
and
remember this.
his
This was such an era.
his Richard Bachman books kind of inform kind of the darker elements of his works. Specifically, there is a Bachman book called Rage, which was released in 1977, a year after the films come out, even.
Yeah,
And that book is about a school shooter. And it's told from the perspective of the school shooter.
wow.
And it's very much a kind of wish fulfillment fantasy about kind of being a bullied, nerdy white kid and getting
Yeah,
to have power in the classroom. That whole book is basically our main character, Charlie Decker, kind of holding the classroom hostage and getting to kind of be the smartest and quickest in the room, and everyone being scared of him, but also like
yeah,
almost enraptured in his like anarchist, not anarchist, that's the wrong word to use, but sort of misanthropic ravings about kind of world and it's very much a school shooter fantasy book. I think that this informs Carrie, which is also kind of I think can easily be read as a femcel as kind of school
yeah,
shootery thing, in which you
yeah,
see kind of a big thing like incel ideology is this idea that like the world is structurally impossible for you to integrate into in a way
yeah,
that even if someone is attracted to you, either going to cheat on you with someone more attractive and wealthy, or they're like using you. And I very much feel like the ending of this film is very much like distilling a sort of femcel mindset, where it completely the film through split screen completely juts out of like a kind of
yeah,
bird's eye view of the events, and we go totally into Carrie's like POV, and it's like to kind of everyone is laughing. This has always been a setup. The world is always built against me. I'm gonna kill him. Uh,
yeah,
and I think that it's really interesting that personally I think you can get like a school shootery femcel reading of the film, of the outcast kind of violently dominating the people around her. Um, Despite Carrie herself being such a compelling and empathetic character. Like I really care
yeah,
about her, and I've especially recently with all the school shootings, it's really hard not to think about the imagery of a school being held violently. In that context.
yeah, yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, I think it's worth bringing up. I want to come back on what you said. I think it is really worth articulating, though, making it clear just how like wonderful like a character she is. And from the very beginning, like I think I remember you like just noticing like, oh, she's very like disobedient, like to her towards her mother. She kind of is always trying very hard to talk to her. She's not disobedient. She's like trying incredibly hard to see her mother as a reasonable person. Um, like whenever she speaks to her about like letting her do something, she's always kind of appealing to like just her logic and like how like very very like modern like r- understandable arguments that she makes, and it kind of really makes her so much more grounded than what she could be, which is a very like kind of her whole like the performance is kind of verging on like complete airiness and dissociation from reality, but actually like the way she talks and communicates to everyone around her is so like genuine, that it makes it really hard not to care about her. And I think what that means with the kind of more difficult readings of the films with her as kind of like vengeful, is that, well, I think that those I think that reading in tandem with the characterization of all the other characters is really interesting, because it's this kind of, it is not a presentation of like, oh, everyone was like mean to me, and now, and obviously she is like intensely bullied by like lots of people and she's like rejected, but I think the idea of like total rejection is much more appropriate. It's this idea that this is like almost not so much microcosmic, but this is like a society in itself. Well, no, actually, yeah, no, it is 100% microcosmic. It is, and that's why I think this film is talking so much about gender, and I think partly why obviously there's a very like real story here going on. It doesn't feel like pure allegory. Like I'm invested in what's happening, and like I think everyone has a lot of personality and everything, but I think this film really functions on like a wider level that makes the like really shocking imagery, which obviously like horrifying, as viscerally horrifying as it is, kind of less personally troubling. But
Yeah,
what that does mean is you have this really like fascinating kind of construction and representation of how broadly, because I don't see Carrie as like a a, a like a social reject, in this kind of microcosmic way. I see her as like someone who, is like a kind of, well, she's the perfect character for demonstrating the evil of this world, because she has no idea why any of this is happening to her. So the horror of like how we treat women, and how I think more importantly, the horror of our gendered existence. Like it's like, while it is about women fully, it is also about just the actual like the horror of constructed gender in general. Um, I think it makes I think it kind of, yeah, makes that horror all the more like fresh, because she just it's so alien to her, essentially. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
yeah, I was gonna say that I think it's, despite your kind of hesitation for a moment, I do think it's fair to kind of read this as very much like through and through, working through gender and womanness. Especially since kind of the
Oh yeah,
origin of
100%.
the origin of
Yeah.
the book being written, and this is like King's first novel that he kind of gets published. Before then, he was just doing short stories. Was King's wife, like criticized him? Was like, "You're always writing about men, you know." Oh no, maybe it wasn't his wife. It was actually his friend. His friend was
Uh
like, "I bet you couldn't write a compelling story about a woman. You know, I feel like you probably couldn't do that." And he was like, "All right, I'll do that." So he wrote Carrie. Then he was like, "Oh, this sucks," and he threw it away. And it was his wife, Tabitha King, who the story goes, she pulled it out of the trash and
Oh
was like,
yeah, yeah.
the slats, and then they made $1 million. And well, yeah, I'll just, from that, like viewing this as kind of very concerted effort to think through gender, from both De Palma and King being men who are trying to actively think through genders that they are not. How do you could you kind of explicate or go into more detail about how you think the film is saying about gender, and how the film is kind of structuring sort of a discussion of like how gender is produced, or
Yeah.
the Butler elements of the film, kind of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
cultural
yeah, yeah.
production of if these are the right ways in which
Yeah, yeah,
approaching
yeah.
it. Yeah, I don't know. I'd just like to hear more about going through like how you
So
think the film's doing that.
100%. Okay, so they are explicitly exploring misogyny through the lens of like how gender is constructed. So I guess what I mean by that is that this is an incredibly, like, in my opinion, forward-thinking text for like how society thinks of misogyny, which is one that takes material existence. So there are like people who are assigned female at birth, and most of those people will experience periods and things like that, and how it is the personal experience of a community of people that creates oppression and kind of discrimination, I guess. So you like I referred to in the beginning when I talked about the period scene. It is like an incredibly difficult scene to watch because it's a very real scene, and it makes you realize essentially how um while like what all these women are doing is like really unfortunate. It's something that all of these women like will probably be going through as well, and um will be doing because of their own experience within society. You are essentially forced to reconcile with the fact that all of these women have been traumatized to such an extent that they view something that they all share as something worth such like condemnation and like hatred. Essentially, all of these women in this text are essentially like you talked about in the in it while we were watching it, the gym teacher, while she's like one of the most lovely characters towards Carrie, she's trying so hard not to hate her and find her annoying. And so constantly throughout this film, you're being essentially reminded how all women are socialized to ostracize one another. And I think that is a very forward-thinking argument because it's not going into the like horror of periods. It's taking like like the way that like women are essentially predisposed to being uh made victim to this, and then like showing how that is completely constructed by society. So that is what I think this film is like completely doing ideologically. Like I think that is like what it is about. I think it is about misogyny through a gender construction lens.
Yeah, I think that kind of get to bringing up Butler, thinking of gender as something that is culturally produced rather than like a natural biological, fake idea we have
Fixture.
of he became our boy.
Yeah.
I think the host Arnie from Now Playing podcast in the Carrie episode they did like years and years ago, it made a really good kind of point in raising kind of eyebrow at the actions of Miss Collins as sort of the other side of Margaret White. Like if Margaret White is kind of the force in Carrie's life that forces her to look at her femininity and feelings of sexuality as only kind of sinful, this kind of puritanical right wing idea of gender. And then Miss Collins is the sort of liberal kind of the great liberal force in Carrie's life who teaches her to only to embrace her womanhood, but only in as much as it could kind of be for men. And there's this great scene, there's so much of this film about Carrie like trying to figure out what she is and what like being a woman means to her, and there's a great scene of Miss Collins holding Carrie's like head in the mirror, like saying, "Look how pretty you are," like and it's obviously she's also staring at herself in the mirror, and there's a clear kind of like you were saying, like this attempt to produce the next line of women in the same way that you were produced, and part of the last 30 minutes of the film, which is like some of those incredible, exciting, fun things in cinema ever. Is can be framed as this kind of utter rejection of the world that came before you, and this sort of like this utter kind of
I love it.
I want no influences on me. I want to kind of
she's burning it down.
Yeah, and maybe a critique is it doesn't get to a point where we're kind of having a constructive conversation about what Carrie could be, because she kind of just self implodes and dies. But Maybe we have to watch the sequel, Carrie 2, The Rage, to find out. Maybe that film will go into this, um, but anyway,
No, I
it's
think
still it's
yeah,
still very interesting, like pitting those two characters against each other to really like make pretty explicit, in my opinion, kind of an argument about gender and its production.
yeah, 100%. And yeah, I think that is the perfect. I think yeah, the ending is completely what I love about it is it's so indulgent. Like the rest of this film has been an incredibly like well thought out. All of the cinematography is so specific and detailed. Specific and detailed for like executing this very clear thesis. And then the last half an hour is pure emotion, in my opinion. It's pure anger and rage and rejection of all of these ideals, which is, also personally what I believe in. This is a film that I really don't feel like I have to project. I'm going to just, go into my recommendation now. Because I would 100% recommend this film. I think it's one of my favorite films. Uh, this is a film that, like I was saying, I don't feel like I have to project my own like ideas onto it at all. I feel like all of this stuff is so profoundly sewn into the stitches of this film that I can't possibly help but see it. I'm watching it for the first time in a few years. Having already really liked the film, I picked this film because I really liked it. But realizing that this was a film, about how Carrie is being taught to be a woman. I want to talk about one of my favorite moments in the entire scene, and what is probably my favorite shot, just over the shot where you realize that Miss Collins is actually looking at herself in the mirror, because I also think that shot is genius. But the swirling I get chills just talking about this shot. The swirling shot of Carrie and Tommy dancing as she's kind of, for once, shown this. I know that it's constructed by a man, and like I think the film is interrogating that, but also at the same time, this swirling moment of joy, as I think Carrie experiences what I would call gender euphoria. I believe that that is something that I think everyone can experience, and I think that is 100% what that shot is trying to communicate, is this like beautiful shining moment of feeling like she can be who she truly is, aside from anyone else's terms. And I think the fact that all of this is being done, and I truly mean that I think this is being done, this isn't a reading, I think this is what the film is about, in a 1977 film directed by Brian De Palma, or 1976, or whatever, is very special, and I think that makes this like worth one of the highest recommendations. Yeah, I love this film.
I also highly recommend this film. I think it's basically perfect. I love everything about it.
Yeah,
Even the nitpicky stuff that kind of every review will kind of pick out as this is less good, such as like the overly long getting ready for the prom scene where blatantly De Palma like knew you had to cut something out but didn't want to remove the scene, so he just like fast forwards, and it's the only time the film ever does the fast forwarding sound effect. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's so cool and
yeah,
good when that happens.
yeah. I
Same
think
with
it's amazing.
the goofy 70s music, torturing the kids at gym class, making them do push-ups. That's a great scene. I love every single thing
Yeah.
about this
Oh
film.
no, that's the best. Honestly, true cinema
Uh,
is the detention scene. True
Little
cinema.
stuff. Um, to go back to the sicko mode Stephen King, is cool, get high all the time kind of stuff. I really like if you go on the villains wiki for Margaret White, you can actually read a bit about about the lore behind like a weird cult kind of religion.
Yeah, yeah.
And in the book, she has to read directly from the wiki, hallucinations of a mysterious quote unquote black man and a burning three-lobed eye. Both are references to the horror deity Nyarlathotep, which is from like H.P. Lovecraft lore.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
in the wider King universe, this is usually distilled into Randall Flagg, the Walking Dude, for fans of The Stand and The Dark Tower.
Mm.
But also, and it's so sick that that Margaret White is like this weird Lovecraft cult for the a monster who is like one of the nicknames is the evil doer, and the implication that like and the Jesus statue that clearly isn't Jesus. I think it's like one of the saints, like one of his disciples, who depicted being killed by arrows. I think there is some like biblical grounding for this image. It's not meant to be Jesus. It's meant to be like a saint,
No,
of
yeah,
some sort. Maybe not a disciple, but at least a saint. I don't remember the name of the thing.
It is big
But
saint vibes.
but just weird shit like that. This is like really really fun and interesting. I and love it. I love it. I love it all. Very cool. Very good. Good film. Good film.
Good film.
Slaps.
Good film.
Bops.
That's the last word on the matter necessary.
Yeah.
Just it's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so that leaves us with a question. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, yeah, we're going back. We're going back to one of our legendary retrospectives. You know, part of the deal with doing retrospectives in the music side of the podcast is we are now going to follow these artists internally to the ends of the earth.
Oh my god, what's happening?
So one of them has put out an album in the past couple of years that we haven't covered yet, called Donda by Kanye West. So
yeah,
we are gonna talk about Donda. And yeah, it's gonna be an
cool
episode of the podcast.
It's Donda time.
Donda time.
Well, thank you very much for listening. Thank you if you've come back from before the hiatus. Thanks for coming back. If you're joining us now, welcome. And yeah, we'll be back next week with a music episode. And yeah, and then after that, we're just back to our regularly scheduled programming basically. So yeah, thank you very much. Bye.